He's too big. His plan is too... See, when God is working out His purposes in our lives, we're not the only ones involved in the plan. Let's say, for instance, you're moving and praying for a new home. That happened to me. When my wife and family and I, we moved down here from the Charlotte area, we were looking for a place to live. We stayed in a little 2-bedroom house for about 6 months. It was incredible. One little tiny bathroom with 6 people in it. Incredible. And we would pray and we would pray. And we would look, I must have looked at 100 houses in this area to try to find a place to live. Had our house on the market in Matthews. It was, some of you were here, you went through the struggle with it. It was a trial. We've never been through anything like it in our lives. A very difficult trial. And we'd find a house, but our house had not sold. We'd find a house. And every time we'd say, we're going to make an offer on it anyway, a contingency offer. Before we can make an offer, somebody would grab that house. Boy, I wish it was that way today, don't you? I mean, you know, people were gobbling up houses just like that. Every time we go to make an offer, somebody would get that house. It was incredible. We ended up, we found one house we liked, and we were going to make an offer on it. We were going to meet our realtor there that morning, and we're standing there on the deck ready to go into that house, and he wasn't there. He had gotten hurt and couldn't be there that day. When he got there the next day, the house was gone. Somebody had already sold my property. It was just like incredible. What a trial. And then all of a sudden, that same realtor called me one day and said, just a couple days after that, or the next week, said, Donnie, we found a house. It's not yet gone on the market. It's going on today. Do you want to see it? Yes. I ran over there as fast as I could. There was an older guy there and his family, and they were going to move. And so we looked at the house, needed a lot of work. And so we went in, and I didn't think my wife would like it. She came down the stairs after looking upstairs. She walked down and she said, I like it. If you don't get it, I'm going to be mad at you. I said, you got it. I said, how much you want? You know? And you know something? We got that house, and some of you even came over and helped us paint and fix it up. I have rooms named for people that paint them. It's really something. I thank you for your help. Do you know that I couldn't get that house until I did? Because the reason those people moved was the woman's mother died. And when she died, they moved back up to where she lived, in their home place. They were not going to move. They would not have moved if she had not died. Now just think about this for a minute. Here I was praying, dear God, give me a house, give me a house, give me a house. I would have had been praying, God, kill this woman so I can have this house. You understand what I'm saying? God works it out according to His timing. And you don't know all that. You don't know all the intricacies of God's timing. You don't know what God's doing behind the scenes in the lives of other people. Maybe it's a job transfer, and you're praying for a job transfer. Well, that person that you're going to go to replace has to leave somewhere. God has to get that ready for you to go there. Everything happens with God's timing when it's His people and He's working it out. And that's what Pharaoh had to learn. That's what Joseph was saying here. Joseph understood that God had a timing and that God was going to do something just as He was going to do it. And there was a famine coming. And it took 2 years. It was going to be over 2 years. God, at a perfect timing, was going to bring Joseph and put him right in that place. Right in that place at the right time so He could bless him. And I want you to understand something. The way God works is amazing to me. I like to say God orchestrates things because when God works in my life, He is working in so many different ways. So many other lives and circumstances to accomplish His blessing for me. So the best thing I can do is just be patient with God. Folks, God does not operate on our schedules. I want you to understand that. I know that we would like for Him to. I know that we would like for Him to do what we want when we want it. But the truth is, we're often not ready for the blessings of God even when we think we are. God's timing is perfect and He knows what we need and when we need it. And Joseph learned that lesson in prison. Notice with me that to trust God's timing requires patience. Now, I'm going to meddle just a little bit. I want you to think for just a moment about your level of patience. On a scale from 1 to 10, where 1 is not patient at all, and 10 is extremely patient. How patient are you? Let me say that our society is not geared toward patience. Everything has to be instant. Our technology proves it. Any of you that have anything to do with computers know what I'm talking about, that the computers today are fast, a whole lot faster than they were 10 years ago, or 5 years ago. And yet they're not fast enough, are they? Because it's quickly moving. Everything's quick today. Quick today. The circuits in a computer are almost traveling at the speed of light, and that's not fast enough for us. When we get in our cars, we need freeways because we can't get there fast enough. When we cook our meals, we need what? Microwaves, because we can't, the old stove won't cook fast enough. And we need high definition TVs because standard definition won't refresh fast enough. You know how TVs don't work, don't you? It's like a screen that comes on just like this all the time, a picture. A picture going so fast, on and on and on, so fast. And with high definition, you get it's so much faster that it comes on. And so that's what makes it so much clearer and brighter. You know, we used to worry about our children driving fast cars, but now our children have learned that everything has to be fast. And that's a problem when we're talking about spiritual things, because God never gets in a hurry. So we have a choice. We're either going to wait on the Lord, or we're going to run fast. It's like the story I read about some American soldiers in Korea during the Korean War. And these soldiers had rented a house, and they had hired a Korean boy to do their housekeeping and cooking. They did that sometime. And the young boy had a positive attitude. He was always smiling, so the soldiers thought they'd play some tricks on him. Well, first, each night they nailed his shoes to the floor. And in the morning, the boy would get up, his shoes would be nailed to the floor. He'd take a pair of pliers and pull the nails out, and he would put his shoes on, and he would go to work. So then they went to the kitchen, they put grease all over the stove knobs. So his hand would slide. What did he do? He took a rag, and he wiped them off, and he went on smiling and singing as he cooked the meals for those soldiers. And then next, they balanced buckets of water. I'm not giving anybody ideas, but they're balancing buckets of water on the doors. So when that boy would open that door, that water would drench that poor Korean boy. But each time he would dry off and serve the soldiers. And finally the soldiers became ashamed of themselves for how they treated that Korean boy. And they said to him, "We want you to know that your attitude has impressed us, and we are never going to treat you again." "No more?" asked the boy. "No more. No more nails to the shoe?" "No more," they said. "No more sticky on the stove?" "No more." "No more buckets of water on the door?" "No more," replied the soldier. "Okay," then said the boy, "then I put no more spit in your soup." He said with a smile. And that's the way it is for patience. Patience is we can go around with a smile on our faces, right? But inside, we are a bundle of knots. We are tied up in knots because we're not very patient. But folks, patience means to trust God even when everyone else says there's no hope. Patience means to be calm when everything around us is in chaos. Patience means to follow God's direction even when it looks like a dead end. I heard Dr. Charles Stanley say one time, he said, "I believe God knows what's best for me. And if God told me to go down an alley that had a dead end, he said, I'd run to it as hard as I could because I believe God would make a hole in that brick wall at the end of it." That's patience and faith. And patience is waiting on the Lord and trusting Him. I like what Isaiah said, the prophet Isaiah in Isaiah 40, 29 through 31. "Have you not known? Have you not heard? The everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, neither faints nor is weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the weak, and to those who have no might He increases strength. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. You know that Hebrew word for wait is the word kavah, and it literally means to bind together. And it has to do with a rope, like the hemp that ropes, those little brown ropes are made out of, all those little strands of hemp. When you take them and bind them together and braid them together, they're not very strong by themselves, but when you braid them together, they become very strong. As you stretch it, it even gets stronger. It gets stronger and stronger. You know, when we're willing to wait on the Lord, and our faith has been stretched and becomes stronger and stronger, then what happens? God can use that to bring blessing in our lives. And for 2 years, Joseph's faith was tested. It was not pleasant in that prison. It might have been tolerable, but it was still prison. And Joseph went out. He didn't understand why he was forgotten. In Genesis 40, 14, 15, Joseph interpreted the dream of that butler. And he said, just remember me when you get out. But when the butler was released, he forgot Joseph, and all Joseph could do was wait for the time when God would deliver him. And that time would not come for 2 years. Even if it was a prison, it was the safest place for Joseph to be, to wait on God's blessing. But when God was ready, nothing would prevent Joseph from being released. Let's read a little bit and see what happened. It came to pass at the end of 2 full years, Pharaoh had a dream, and behold, he stood by the river, and suddenly there came up out of the river 7 cows, fine looking and fat, and they fed in the meadow. And then behold, 7 other cows came up after them out of the river, ugly and skinny, and stood by the other cows on the bank of the river. And the ugly and skinny cows ate up the 7 fine looking and fat cows. So Pharaoh awoke. He slept and dreamed a second time, and suddenly 7 heads of grain came up on one stalk, plump and good. And then behold, 7 thin heads, blighted by the east wind, sprang up after him. And the 7 thin heads devoured the 7 plump and full heads. So Pharaoh awoke, and indeed it was a dream. Now it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he called for all the magicians of Egypt and all his wise men. And Pharaoh told him of his dreams, but there was no one who could interpret them for Pharaoh. And then the chief butler, there he is, after 2 years. The chief butler spoke to Pharaoh saying, hey, I remember something. I remember my thoughts this day. When Pharaoh was angry with his servants and he put me in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, both me and the chief baker, we each had a dream in one night, he and I, and each of us dreamed according to the interpretation of his own dream. Now there was a young Hebrew man with us there, a servant of the captain of the guard, and we told him, and he interpreted our dreams for us. To each man he interpreted according to his own dream, and it came to pass, just as he interpreted for us, so it happened. He restored me to my office, and he hanged him. And then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him quickly out of the dungeon. He shaved and changed his clothes and came to Pharaoh. Yes, to trust God's timing requires patience, and to receive God's blessings, we must trust His timing. But when God is ready and we're ready, God will bless us. Notice with me, secondly, that God's blessings come with a personal testimony. See, when God made man, He made him for His glory. Everything in creation is for the glory of God. Listen, God is not some genie in a lamp that appears when we need Him and grants us 3 wishes. God is greater than that. Whenever God blesses us, it is always so we can use His blessings for His glory. And He knows when we will use His blessings for His glory. Notice what happened with Joseph. After 2 years of being forgotten, this butler hears Pharaoh telling about his dream, and he reminds Joseph. He is reminded of Joseph. And so he tells Pharaoh, and Pharaoh brings Joseph into his presence. So Pharaoh's dream becomes a vehicle for Joseph's own testimony about God. Verse 15. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that you can understand the dream to interpret it. So Joseph came through. Joseph could have been bitter. He could have expressed anger toward the butler. He could have pleaded ignorant. He said, I'll let the other guy do it. But Joseph saw the opportunity. In verse 16, so Joseph answered Pharaoh, it is not in me. I don't know the answer. But God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Folks, when the opportunity came, Joseph took it to testify to the grace and power of God. Friends, everything we should be is for the glory of God. Our entire lives should be spent